I'm Elaine Viets. Miami has a rich culinary history, from Southern cooking to South American, from the Bahamas to New York City. Miami food is as deliciously diverse as Miami. Where else can you see Don Perignon sold at a fast food restaurant? Or an outrageous Jewban sandwich? Mandy Baca serves up this mouth-watering information in her new book, The Sizzling History of Miami Cuisine, on today's Dead-End Job Shows. I'm
Oh,
Elaine Viets, and I'm talking to Mandy Baca about her new book, The Sizzling History of Miami Cuisine, on today's Dead-End Job Show. Hi, Mandy. What
hi,
is it?
Elaine.
Glad you're
Sorry.
here. What is a Jewban sandwich, and where can we get one?
So a Cuban sandwich really consists of Cuban bread, ham, roasted pork, Swiss cheese, pickles, and mustard.
Mm-hmm.
And you could find it just about anywhere in Miami. That's what the great thing about it. Miami is, you could find it in a little gas station to the finest restaurants in Miami. Just because it's something that so really symbolizes the Cuban cuisine.
And which fast food place is it in Miami that has Dom Perignon? Not that I'm going to order it any day, but it's just kind of nice to know. Which fast food place in Miami has Don Perignon on the menu? Champagne.
I'm I
That
don't
isn't
know that.
that isn't Miami Subs, is it?
Oh, yes, it is. You're right. I'm sorry. I forgot about that.
Okay. Miami started as a fly-infested swamp, and it grew into a vacation playground. But the first native settlers ate lots of seafood, just like we do now. They also had food that we don't see on any menus today. At least, I don't think that they serve manatee. Uh, is there any other food that you can think of that we don't serve on our tables now, but was big in early Miami?
Definitely. We definitely don't eat turtles anymore, and that was a
No.
delicacy back then. And sometimes this was rare, but sometimes whales would come by, and they would eat whales as well.
Do you know what manatee tastes like? I mean, it's obviously you can't eat one because it's a protected species, but it's also called a sea cow. Was it more like beef or fish? Does anybody know anymore?
Um, I did not. I was not able to read. I did not find any, um, references to that at all.
Oh, so it's going to have to stay a mystery.
Apparently, I think so.
Um, the big difference between native and non-native food in Florida, everybody thinks that the orange is typical of Florida food, but it's really not. Tell us where the orange is from and how did it get to be so identified with Florida?
Well, it originates really from. I mean, it's from Asia, the fruit itself, but it made its way to the New World when all the explorers were making their way over here, and it really, grew well in Central Florida. And when the big freeze of the 1880s happened, um, all of the crops were destroyed, and so they moved the orange crop industry to South Florida because we don't have that type of weather where our crops freeze, and it prospered here, and that's really how we became known as the Orange City or the Orange County, but really it comes from Asia, which is interesting.
Now, in Miami, waves of immigrants have added their food sort of in layers to Miami. And you said that the Bahamians came first and they lived along the beach. And one of the first settlers of Coconut Grove, which is a very upscale area right now, was a black Bahamian man. What was the Bahamian contribution to Miami food?
Oh, it's really great. Really, they thought this area of Coconut Grove resembled, their land of the Bahamas so much that it really was their their second home. So they brought all of their crops with them, sourtops, mamey. They brought that with them and they planted them here. And that's how they influenced us. They also introduced conch fritters to us and all that type of food. It was interesting.
And the 1920s saw the influx of Jewish people, so that the Miami area has some of the best delis this side of New York. What kind of food did they bring in? And it's obviously very different from the Bahamians. But tell us a little bit about the Jewish contribution to Miami food.
Yes, of course. So they came from the Northeast, and typically this Jewish community had influences of Eastern European descendants. They're not like the Jewish community that you could find in Spain. So it was a shock to the system, the local system, because they're bringing things like all the cured meats and smoked fish. And I mean, we were already eating smoked fish here, but it was in their different take. They were bringing the delis and all their meats to this area.
I think it was the Cuban people who possibly added the most spice to the food. It's, in fact, one criticism, if there is any, of Miami food is it's a little too heavy on the Cuban. Tell us a little bit about the Cuban contribution.
Okay, they came in the 1960s because of the Cuban Revolution, of course, and yes, they really did. They had nowhere else to go, so they came to Miami, which was their closest, neighbor, and they really brought all of their customs with them, and they didn't assimilate to, the American culture that existed here in Miami. They really brought their traditions and ingrained them in Miami, and that's why the Cuban population proliferates here and really grew. And they really took to really using their local ingredients. Because we're so close to Cuba, they could continue using their same ingredients because they grew well here.
And we're what 90 miles from Cuba in Miami?
Correct.
Yeah. Now, you've got a tweet which I thought perfectly, you put it in your book, which perfectly illustrates the different kinds of Miami food. And the tweet says, "You're a man of many talents. You cook latkes like a bube, you tostones like an abuela, and fish like a Catholic on Good Friday." This is grandma food, comfort food. Latkes are potato pancakes. What are tostones?
Tostones are fried and, fried plantains. Mashed down. They're great with everything. I think you could eat them any time of the day. Personal opinion.
I've never met a Cuban meal I didn't like. Now, the food season we're really excited about now is stone crabs. And this year, Joe's Stone Crabs, which is probably the most famous stone crab restaurant in South Florida, turns 100 years old. Tell us a little bit about stone crabs and who discovered them. It certainly wasn't Joe.
No, it wasn't. Well, Joe's began as just an American-style restaurant. A little hole-in-the-wall sandwich shop that also made a couple of big meals. But really, it was a neighborhood place. And along the way, he met a gentleman that, introduced him to the concept of the stone crabs. They were native to this area, and so he brought it to his attention, and that's when he decided, well, I guess I'll put it on the menu, and then it became popular.
Stone crabs really do have thick shells. It takes, 4 whacks with a hammer to actually break the claws?
Yes.
Now, in some of the old Miami restaurants are still in business. One of the old style Cuban restaurants is Versailles. Can you tell us about some other hot spots that are still in operation that have been around for years and years?
um, mm,
I know there's one near the Everglades that has gator tail.
there is, let me see,
Coopertown?
Cooper, is it Coopertown? Coopstown?
I think
Sorry,
so.
I'm like,
And another favorite, which is still in business, it's since the 1920s. It's been through several different transformations. Is Tobacco Road,
yes,
uh,
of
which is
course.
now famous for local music and food. Um,
Correct.
and the National and the Delano hotels on South Beach are still going strong.
Yes.
And some live only in memories. I think a lot of little girls of a certain age remember Burdine's Tea Room. Um, can you tell us anything about that?
Yes. There was this, I loved reading the stories of that time because, Burdines was our store. It was created in Miami and it really began here. So they had a couple of dining options, and one was the tea room. And mothers would take their daughters to this tea restaurant, and they would have traditional tea service, and the little girls would get all dressed up, and they would bring their little dolls, and they would have special desserts for them. So I think it was a really great experience for growing up in this area in the 50s, and you definitely would see the socialites go there.
Now, black socialites went to a different place because thanks to pioneer Julia Tuttle, Miami was deeply segregated. And so black people were not allowed in many of these restaurants for years and years and years. But there was a special place for black people that hosted the likes of Billie Holiday and Nat King Cole, Bessie Smith. Do you remember the name of that place?
It is I believe it was I'm sorry, give me 1 second.
Georgette's Tea Room?
Georgette's Tea Room, correct.
Right. Is Did that go out of business once integration was in full swing?
Yes, it did. It did because now the black community was able to go to the beach and enjoy the same privileges as everyone else. So, people began moving away from that area.
Well, I got a kick. Your book is more a history book than a recipe book, but as you pointed out, recipes can tell us a lot about what people ate during a particular time. And I saw some interesting recipes for bear steak, uh,
Yes.
turtles, turtle steak, which is now endangered. The turkey barbecued with avocado looked kind of good.
Yeah, and it's like one of the only recipes I feel in the book that's still pretty accessible and easy to make.
I can't see serving sliced tongue at a lady's luncheon, but apparently they did back in the 40s and 50s. Was that because of the meat shortages, or was that just the style of the day?
That was really just the style of the day. Because Miami's always been influenced by different, communities that come live here. That was something that was brought, by the Jewish community in that time.
And now you talked about the Mango Gang. Who is the Mango Gang, and how did they influence Miami cooking?
Of course, the Mango Gang really solidified Miami as a food city or food town. It really started with Chef Alan Sasser, and it was in the 80s, and they went They the local food culture nationally was about going back to basics and using local ingredients as the core of cooking, and they really adopted that, and they really decided, well, wow, we've been making French food this whole time. Why not use local ingredients and do something interesting? I mean, we definitely have ingredients that other parts of the country don't have. So they started that movement, and it was called the Mango Gang because really the mango is like one of the most important crops here, and they use it in a lot of the food that they created. And of course, it also includes Norman Van Aken and Douglas Rodriguez and Mark Militello as well.
Well, you had a funny line about how hardly a fish was served in Miami that wasn't spackled with mango relish during that period.
It's very true. I mean, that was the most famous dish of the decade.
Now, there was a cookbook, I believe, back in the 20s by Charles Baker Jr., who had the ridiculous belief that a lot of people entertained back then that women may cook, but men are real chefs. Miami now has some women celebrity chefs. Can you tell us a little bit about the likes of Michelle Bernstein and some of the others?
Yes, of course. I mean, it's definitely been a long battle, not just here, but nationally. He was correct. Women chefs, have a harder time making it in the kitchen, and it doesn't really make sense, but because it doesn't. But it is interesting to see that. But we definitely have noticed a big impact of women chefs here. You have Michelle Bernstein, and you have sorry, give me 1 second.
Who is Michelle Bernstein? Does she have her own restaurant? How is she connected with the area?
Michelle Bernstein actually was, a pioneer in, the food scene kind of died off after the Mango Gang. In the 90s, it was a little bit of a standstill. And then in the 2000s, and then in 2006, she opened her restaurant, Mishi's, and really brought up a neighborhood and brought attention back onto the food scene in Miami. And you also have Dina Marino of MC Kitchen, who's making, big strides locally as well.
And I think there's Ingrid Hoffman, too?
Correct.
Now, one of my favorite lines in the book was about food in the 1980s. And you said that the food scene was decadent. Would you describe this decadence, what it meant?
Yes, of course. Again, really going with the national trend at that time. It was all about big and bigger and much bigger. It was truffles and foie gras and duck and big portions. That's really what people liked during that time. And so that proliferated here, too. It was the Miami Vice scene. And just eating out in big portions, whether it was, sorry, I don't have anything else about that.
Well, I think what's interesting about that time was that dinner was fabulously expensive. You could spend a month's rent on dinner for two in Miami. Now, not all Miami restaurants are expensive. There are some that are fast food restaurants that are very affordable. There's Royal Castle, which is kind of modeled after White Castle, which I knew about growing up in the Midwest. White Castle had little burgers, and you tended to eat them after midnight and after many beers. And there's also Pollo Tropical, which is in business and thriving, and Burger King. I don't think a lot of people realize that Burger King is also Miami created. Uh, what can you tell us a little bit about Miami fast food?
Well, Miami fast food actually, people don't think of Miami when the words fast food come to mind. But, we really did have an impact. From Royal Castle, as you mentioned, and Pollo Tropical, we created, Burger King started here. Um, and that's really interesting. It started in the 50s on Brickell Avenue, back when Brickell Avenue wasn't what it is now. Um, and it became this big empire. And other chains as well began in Miami, like Tony Roma's. Um,
Tony Roma's is a rib place, right?
yes, correct.
Um, Jewish deli food is seen as very old-fashioned food now, but there's a new Jewish deli. I think it's called Josh's Deli and Appetizing in Surfside.
Yes,
Uh,
correct.
what can you tell us about the food there?
It's really, it's great, and it's interesting. And if anyone ever is in Miami, you have to go and try this place, because Josh really takes the traditional and adds his own little twist to it. So a little twist meaning, you're in Miami, so he can add a little Miami flair to his dishes. So
Any mangoes?
no mangoes. Maybe. He does make donuts every weekend, so maybe he'll make a mango donut. But he makes this sandwich called a Jewban.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a Cuban sandwich, but instead of the pork, he puts pastrami. He replaces it with pastrami.
Oh,
So
that
it
sounds
adds a
good.
little bit of a Jewish flair to it. It's really good. It's delicious. It's my favorite.
Now, what do you see as the future of Miami food? Because we're always going to be getting immigrants in. We've had waves of Haitians, people from Central America. Uh, what do you see? Will any particular cuisine dominate, or is it going to continue to blend in all of these elements?
I think it's going to be a little mixture of the two. There's going to definitely always be influence from outside communities, as we see there's a lot more Asians coming into our community, and so that's definitely going to grow, especially since the interest in that type of food is growing. And I also think that the interest in kind of going again back to our roots, but our Caribbean roots. I don't think right now we see a lot of the Trinidadian or Jamaican food being that strong here, and I think that's going to grow a little bit as people try to take influence from the neighboring communities.
Well,
But of course, you're always going to have the core influences like the Cuban and Nicaraguan. That's always going to be here. That's never going to go away.
well, I'm looking through some of these old recipes here, and the JFK salad, which was created at the Fontainebleau Hotel for John F. Kennedy, looks good. It kind of looks like it might be a version of a Caesar salad. I could probably do without the avocado ice cream, and and if I'm really lucky, I'm never going to eat the cheese and green pea salad.
Yes, no, I definitely. There's some things there that I'm a little turned off by. But it's so interesting to see. It would be interesting to see a restaurant do one of these recipes just for kicks.
Well, the cheese and green pea, which any of our listeners can make, is you take American cheese, cut it into tiny little blocks, mix it with green peas, which have been cooked and drained, sprinkle with white wine pepper, uh, lightly fold in mayonnaise, serve on lettuce, I would think the calories would equal the national debt, but it doesn't really grab me. I do, however, kind of like the tropical ketchup, which has a lot of guavas, raisins, and ginger. That sounds good. So you've unearthed some really interesting things. And I liked your little tip, by the way, that there was a shortage of fat during the early pioneer days. Not food, there was lots of food, but there wasn't enough fat. And then an alligator could give you a 6-month supply of fat for soap. Um,
Yes.
Anyway, thank you, Mandy Baca, for telling us the sizzling history of Miami cuisine on today's Dead End Job Show.